The ridicule. In the vast expanse of space, the Zyphar Empire ruled with an iron grip. They had conquered countless worlds, faced untold enemies, and defeated them all with ease. To the Zyphar, there was no civilization more powerful than theirs, no race that could challenge their might. They had seen alien species rise and fall, each one a fleeting blip in the galaxy. Then came Earth. At first, the Zyphar didn't even consider it worth a second glance. Earth's technology was primitive, their cities small, their military laughable. They had been watching the humans for years, studying their strange customs and analyzing their weak weapons. The Zyphar scouts reported nothing of importance. Earth was nothing more than a speck in the universe, barely worth acknowledging. But that was until a message came through. It was an encrypted transmission, something the Zyphar had never seen before. The message was from Earth. The Zyphar commanders scoffed at it, believing it to be a desperate plea for help, a meaningless transmission sent by a species that had no hope of surviving. They laughed, exchanging jokes about the so-called power of humanity. Pathetic, one Zyphar general muttered, shaking his head. Another laughed loudly. They think they can stand against us. This tiny army of theirs is nothing more than ants. But there was something unusual about the message. Despite their mockery, the Zyphar couldn't ignore the feeling that something was off. The humans weren't asking for help. They were preparing for war. And they were ready to fight. An unknown enemy, but with a confidence that seemed impossible for such a small, insignificant species. The Zyphar couldn't help but laugh again. Who were these humans to challenge them? To even think they could fight against the mighty Zyphar Empire? "Let them try," said the commander. "We'll crush them, just like we've crushed every other species." But what they didn't know, what no one knew, was that this tiny army had been quietly preparing something far more dangerous than the Zyphar could ever imagine. As the Zyphar commanders turned their attention back to their war plans, they couldn't have known that they were about to make the biggest mistake of their lives. Their laughter would soon turn into shock, and their arrogance would be their downfall. The tiny army. The Zyphar fleet was already on its way to Earth. They couldn't be bothered to waste any more time on the humans. They believed that no matter what, victory would be theirs. The tiny army of Earth posed no real threat, they thought. It was just a matter of reaching the planet, landing, and wiping out the pitiful forces they had on the ground. As their massive ships cruised through space toward Earth, the Zyphar scouts observed the planet from afar. They saw the human soldiers gathering in what appeared to be tiny numbers, just a few hundred, scattered across the world, equipped with outdated weapons. The Zyphar sneered at the sight, finding it almost laughable. "They're all so weak," one of the Zyphar officers said, chuckling as he watched humans from his ship's observation deck. "Their military barely has the resources to defend themselves." The scouts sent back reports to the Zyphar commanders, each one echoing the same message. "Earth's army is small and disorganized, no match for our power." The commanders, still in disbelief, were now sure that the humans were simply too foolish to understand their place in the galaxy. They couldn't fathom why Earth would even attempt to resist. The Zyphar had superior weapons, technology beyond anything the humans could ever dream of, and ships that could wipe out entire cities in an instant. The commanders ordered their fleet to land and strike immediately. The humans wouldn't even have time to react. The Zyphar soldiers laughed amongst themselves, making jokes about how easily the humans would fall. But as they descended toward Earth's surface, something strange caught their attention. There was an energy signature, unlike anything the Zyphar had seen before, coming from one of the human military bases. The scouts couldn't explain it. It didn't match anything Earth should have had. "What is this?" the lead scout asked, his eyes narrowing as he studied the strange energy readings. "Is this a trap?" "Impossible," the Zyphar commander snapped. "There's no way they could hide anything dangerous. It's probably just a malfunction. Continue the mission." But the commander's doubt lingered. The Zyphar knew that the humans were not nearly advanced enough to pose a real challenge. Still, the strange energy left an unsettling feeling, like a warning they couldn't quite understand. They pushed forward, convinced that their superiority would make this just another easy conquest. They landed with thunderous force, expecting the world's armies to scatter before their might. But as the Zyphar marched onto the surface of Earth, they were met with nothing. No immediate defense, no resistance, only silence. The Zyphar laughed once again, their arrogance growing. But little did they know, this silence was the calm before the storm. The human secret. As the Zyphar soldiers spread across the land, they began to search for any signs of resistance. They had landed in a remote area, surrounded by dense forests and abandoned buildings. The silence was eerie, but the Zyphar took it as a sign of victory. They believed the humans were hiding, too afraid to face their might. But deep within Earth's military bases, a secret had been unfolding for years, one that the Zyphar could never have anticipated. The so-called tiny army that the Zyphar mocked was not as helpless as they appeared. Earth's military had long since started preparing for a war that they knew was coming, though they didn't fully understand the nature of the threat. The military leaders had partnered with the world's brightest scientists to create a new generation of soldiers, humans genetically enhanced for combat. These soldiers were not the weak, fragile beings the Zyphar had assumed them to be. They were stronger, faster, and smarter than any ordinary human. In a hidden laboratory far from the Zyphar's watchful eyes, these soldiers had undergone intense training and modifications. Their strength was augmented, their senses heightened, and their intelligence sharpened to the point where they could outthink and outmaneuver even the most advanced alien forces. Their bodies had been transformed into living weapons. But there was another element that made them even more dangerous: human ingenuity. The soldiers had learned how to combine advanced Earth technology with alien technology scavenged from past encounters. It was this mix of creativity and power that the Zyphar had never seen before, and it was this secret that Earth's military had kept hidden, even from the general population. As the Zyphar roamed the Earth, still overconfident and dismissive of their tiny opponents, they had no idea what they were about to face. The genetically enhanced humans had already infiltrated the areas where the Zyphar were landing. They were watching. They were waiting. And they knew exactly when to strike. Back at the secret base, a young commander named Captain Alina watched the movements of the Zyphar from a large screen, her heart pounding. Her enhanced soldiers stood by, ready for action. She had one goal in mind: to protect Earth and show the Zyphar that they had made a terrible mistake. Alina's hand hovered over a red button on her console. When she pressed it, the entire base would spring to life. And so would the army that had been training for years in secret. The Zyphar had no idea what was coming. Their arrogance would be their downfall. With a deep breath, Alina gave the order: activate the counterattack. And so, the quiet silence of Earth was shattered. The tiny army began to move, swiftly and silently, preparing to strike. The first strike. The Zyphar soldiers, spread across Earth's surface, continued their march through the quiet, abandoned cities. Their massive boots crushed the earth beneath them, the sound echoing like thunder. They had already taken out a few small human settlements, barely pausing to check if any resistance remained. The human military was non-existent, or so they thought. But as the Zyphar moved deeper into human territory, something began to feel wrong. The atmosphere had changed. The stillness in the air was no longer comforting. It was suffocating. They couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The further they advanced, the more uneasy they became. They had expected resistance. But this silence, it was unsettling. Then it happened. Without warning, the first explosion ripped through the ground beneath their feet. The ground trembled as a massive blast sent shockwaves through the air. The Zyphar soldiers stumbled, surprised by the sudden attack. Before they could react, another explosion erupted, this time from the side. They were surrounded. From the shadows of the ruined buildings, Figures emerge, human soldiers, dressed in advanced camouflage suits, their faces covered by helmets. They moved with the precision and coordination of an army far more advanced than the Zyphar had ever expected. These weren't ordinary humans. These were the genetically enhanced soldiers, trained in secret for this very moment. The Zyphar scrambled to retaliate, but the humans were already one step ahead. Using guerrilla tactics, they struck swiftly and silently, disappearing into the landscape just as quickly as they had arrived. The Zyphar fired their weapons at shadows, their advanced energy beams cutting through the air, but the humans were always just out of reach. "They're everywhere," one of the Zyphar commanders shouted, his voice filled with disbelief. "How are they doing this?" The Zyphar tried to regroup, but the humans were relentless. They hit fast and hard, using traps and hidden explosives to disrupt the alien forces. As the battle raged on, the Zyphar quickly realized that they were being outsmarted at every turn. They had expected to face an army of weak, unprepared humans, but they were wrong. The humans had become something else entirely. In the midst of the chaos, Captain Elena watched the battlefield unfold on a monitor. Her heart raced with adrenaline as she saw her soldiers moving with unparalleled efficiency. Each strike was calculated, each maneuver precise. They were doing it. They were holding their own against the mighty Zyphar. But it wasn't enough to simply hold their ground. Elena knew that this battle was just the beginning. They needed to push forward, to show the Zyphar that humanity would not bow to their invaders. She gave the order. "Push them back. Don't let them regroup." And with that command, the human soldiers launched their next wave of attacks. The Zyphar, now realizing they were in a battle unlike any they had faced before, started to panic. They had underestimated Earth, and now they were paying the price. But the Zyphar still had the advantage in numbers and technology. This first strike was just the opening move, and both sides knew it. The real battle was only just beginning. The turnaround. The battle had raged for hours. The Zyphar, though taken by surprise, began to regroup, their fear slowly turning into anger. They were far superior in terms of technology, and they still had numbers on their side. They had underestimated the humans, but they weren't about to let this small resistance stop them. The Zyphar commanders were determined to crush this tiny army once and for all. They called in reinforcements, bringing in more ships and heavy weaponry. The battlefield trembled as the Zyphar deployed their most advanced weapons, lasers, and energy shields that could obliterate entire cities in a matter of seconds. They unleashed all their power on the humans, hoping to break their resolve. But the humans weren't retreating. They weren't running. Instead, they had a new strategy. As the Zyphar advanced, the human soldiers appeared to be falling back. One by one, the Zyphar took the bait. They followed the retreating soldiers into a narrow valley, their weapons primed and ready for the final blow. It was here, deep within the valley, that the humans had set their trap. The moment the Zyphar troops entered, the ground beneath them shifted. Explosions erupted from beneath their feet, shaking the entire landscape. Hidden mines and explosives, planted days before, went off in rapid succession, sending the alien forces into chaos. The Zyphar were caught off guard once again. "Fall back! Fall back!" A Zyphar officer screamed, but it was too late. The humans, having anticipated the aliens' movements, activated their next phase of the plan. Suddenly, the Zyphar's high-tech weapons, laser rifles and plasma cannons, began to malfunction. Their advanced energy shields flickered and sputtered, unable to protect them from the relentless onslaught. Panic spread through the ranks as their equipment failed. The Zyphar, now disoriented and struggling, were easy targets for the hidden human soldiers who attacked with precision. The cause of the malfunction: human technology, primitive by Zyphar standards, but adapted with something far more dangerous than they realized. Alien tech scavenged from previous battles. The humans had taken parts of fallen Zyphar ships and weapons, reverse engineering them to create devices that could disrupt the alien technology. The Zyphar's own weapons turned against them. Impossible, a Zyphar officer shouted, watching in disbelief as his own weapons misfired, injuring his own soldiers. How can they have done this? But there was no time to figure it out. The human soldiers were relentless, using their knowledge of the terrain and their new advantage to systematically dismantle the alien forces. The battle was turning in the humans' favor, and the Zyphar could feel it. Back at Earth's command center, Captain Elena watched in astonishment as her soldiers pushed forward. They had done it. They had taken the Zyphar by surprise again, using their technology and their brains to even the odds. But Elena knew this was just a momentary victory. The Zyphar were still powerful, and they wouldn't give up so easily. Yet, for the first time, Elena allowed herself a small smile. The humans had proven they could hold their own. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for victory. The true power of the humans. As the Zyphar scrambled to recover from the unexpected turn of events, they knew they were facing something they hadn't prepared for. Their technology was being overwhelmed, their soldiers caught off guard by the resilience and adaptability of the humans. The Zyphar commanders had underestimated the Earth's tiny army, but they weren't going to make that mistake again. They were no longer laughing. However, the Zyphar still had one powerful advantage: numbers. With a massive fleet in orbit and reinforcements still arriving, they were determined to crush the human resistance once and for all. But there was something the Zyphar didn't know. The humans had one final weapon, one that would change everything. Deep in a hidden facility far from the front lines, Captain Elena and her team had been working on a secret project, something more powerful than anything the Zyphar could imagine. After years of studying alien technology, the humans had perfected a weapon capable of turning the tide of battle in their favor. Elena stood before the control panel, watching the activation sequence as her hand hovered over the final button. Her soldiers, now fully aware of what was at stake, stood silently behind her. Every second felt like an eternity, the weight of their mission bearing down on them. With a deep breath, Elena pressed the button. From underground bunkers and hidden bases, massive machines began to rise from the ground. They were unlike anything the Zyphar had seen before. Robotic giants, constructed with Earth's ingenuity and enhanced with technology scavenged from the remains of fallen Zyphar ships. These machines were powered by human-designed energy cores, combining the best of both Earth and alien tech. The ground shook as the machines lumbered into position, their massive metal bodies gleaming in the sunlight. Each one was armed with weapons that could level entire cities, their movements smooth and calculated. The Zyphar's confidence wavered as they saw these towering machines emerge from the Earth. They had never faced anything like this before. From the sky, Earth's remaining fleet descended. A coordinated assault led by Elena's own command ship. The humans had created their own technological advantage, and now it was time to use it. The Zyphar couldn't believe what they were seeing. These weren't the weak humans they had expected. These were warriors, creators, crafting weapons of their own to fight back. The Zyphar launched a counterattack, deploying their most powerful ships and weapons. Their energy beams and plasma bombs streaked across the sky, but the humans were ready. The giant robots stood firm, their shields absorbing the Zyphar's fire with ease. Meanwhile, the human fleet retaliated with precision, targeting the Zyphar's weak points, dismantling their ships one by one. The battle raged on, but the Zyphar were losing ground fast. The sheer power and ingenuity of the human force were overwhelming. As the Zyphar's ships fell from the sky, their commanders were forced to rethink everything they had known about war. One Zyphar commander, watching from the cockpit of his ship, stared in disbelief at the destruction unfolding before him. "How are they doing this?" he muttered, his hands trembling. "We have the technology, the weapons, the experience. How can they stand against us?" But the truth was undeniable. The humans were winning. Their secret weapon, their ability to adapt and innovate, had turned the tide of the war. And the Zyphar, despite their superiority in many areas, could not overcome it. Elena watched as the final Zyphar ships began to retreat into space, unable to withstand the human onslaught. She knew the battle wasn't over yet, but this victory was a turning point. The humans had proven their strength, their creativity, and their unyielding will to survive. And in that moment, the Zyphar realized the truth. It wasn't just the humans' technology that made them dangerous. It was their minds, their spirit, and their ability to outthink and outfight any enemy that stood in their way. The victory. The battle had shifted. The Zyphar, once confident in their dominance, were now on the run. Their ships and forces, battered and broken, retreated back into the depths of space. Earth's military, bolstered by their secret weapon, had done the impossible. The tiny army, once mocked, had become the nightmare of the Zyphar Empire. And now, as the last of the Zyphar fleet fled, the humans stood victorious. Captain Elena stood atop the command platform, her eyes scanning the battle below. The sky was littered with the wreckage of fallen Zyphar ships, their once mighty vessels now burning husks. The ground beneath her feet rumbled as Earth's robotic giants, silent, massive sentinels, moved to secure the area, ensuring that no Zyphar forces remained. The battle was over. Humanity had won. For the first time, the Zyphar commanders felt true fear. They had underestimated their enemies, laughed at their weakness, and now they were forced to acknowledge that they were no match for the resilience of the human spirit. In their arrogance, they had overlooked one simple truth. Humanity was not defined by technology or brute force alone. It was defined by its ability to adapt, to innovate, and to unite in the face of impossible odds. As Elena watched the retreating Zyphar fleet disappear into the distance, her thoughts turned to the future. Earth had won this battle, but the war had only just begun. The humans had shown their strength, but now they had to prepare for whatever came next. The Zyphar would not forget this defeat. They would return, stronger and more determined than ever. But Elena knew something the Zyphar didn't. Humanity would be ready. The humans, once thought weak and insignificant, had proven that they were not to be underestimated. They had faced a foe far more powerful than themselves, and they had emerged victorious. The tiny army, the so-called insignificant humans, had shown the universe their true strength. And now, as the world began to rebuild and the scars of war slowly healed, one thing was certain: Earth had earned its place among the stars. The Zyphar, and any other race that would dare challenge humanity, would soon learn the same lesson. Humanity was not to be underestimated.